Okay, so who's next to introduce? So Nick, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's good to see those of you who I know. It's nice to meet those of you who I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet. Um, I'm Nick Kawa. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Anthropology at OSU. I'm also affiliate faculty in the Center of Latin American Studies and Comp Studies. Um, and yeah, I guess a lot of my research has taken place in the Amazon region, both in Brazilian Amazonia and the Peruvian Amazon. Recently, I've been actually doing more work here in the Midwest and staying rooted for different reasons, um, out of necessity in part, and also out of sort of obligations to different projects closer to home. My son is also at home today, and he's been watching Home Alone for what seems like the 20th time. So he's he's in the background there. I'll get to you in a sec, okay, Bob? But I had the good fortune of I'm teaching an ethnobotany class this spring, and I've taught for, I think this is the third spring in a row. And I had the good fortune of having Kadeen and Terry come into the class. Oh, I don't know. It's hard to keep track of time anymore. Like what is time? But I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And so it was really great to have them engage those students, get them to kind of reflect on Kadeen's exhibition. None of them have actually had the opportunity to visit it yet. And so Terry and the Center for Latin American Studies have been very generous to help organize a couple of different visits for students, both in my class and in one of Michelle's classes. And so we're trying to kind of figure that out, but I think they're excited to experience it for themselves. So they have, an understanding what it's about, and I've had a chance to kind of engage Kadeen and ask some kind of questions, but I think they're hungry to feel it, on their own terms. And, one of the things that I've kind of pointed out in this class is that in my kind of background and training as a cultural anthropologist, like I can try to share what I know about how people relate to plants and how different cultures kind of conceive of human relationships to plants. But I always kind of emphasize at the end, like, if you want to learn about plants, like the plants are going to be your teachers, like you need to learn from them. And so one way to kind of model that in that classroom is that we start out with a plant raffle. So I'll bring in cuttings of different plants that we'll raffle out to students, and they start bringing plants in. And so usually as part of that, we're getting different plants into students' hands, but they also start kind of developing connections with one another in the class through plants that they have donated. And we're also reading Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass in the course. And so they're also thinking about, questions about reciprocity, both in terms of our obligations to one another in the class, but also obligations to land and to others. And so, I've kind of said, like, what happens in class in terms of lecture and discussion is sort of like, the sort of like window dressing, or that's kind of like the artifice of like what the class is about. But at the core of that course is really about these kind of forms of exchange and the things that students start kind of picking up in terms of those relationships they start developing independently with one another, and the plants that kind of come into that class and start circulating outside of it. So that's why, Kadeen's work is so kind of timely and helpful and insightful for that class. And it's been great to be engaged and to also get to engage with all of you through this.
Thank you, Nick, so much. And hearing, I guess we can use some of this time for some of these follow-up conversations. I think it would be good for at least Alcira and myself to hear that you, Terry, and Kadeen talking through these experiences. In the spirit of how we kind of started today's session in terms of connecting Cachawilacuna and the specific Andean Amazonian context with Kadeen's work, Nick, do you have, from your field work, from the focus, did you say you were focused in the Amazon? And so, how do we make these, I mean, with these very broad, and Alcira put in the chat, like seeds, like, or seeds or soils, right? I mean, there's a sense in which the broadness is important, and that the impetus of learning from the land and that you brought in here. Are there connections that come from your field research in the regions of the Cachawilla project, whether they're indigenous or not, in the sense of that, and then that connect maybe with Kadeen's work? I'm asking for a lot of heavy lifting here, Nick, but I'm just wondering, like, you seem very kind of well placed, I would say, to see things that, for my artistic kind of research, I wouldn't see maybe, and it just seems like you're very well situated between the two projects for this. You can determine whether the seed takeover even makes sense, right, from a concrete level.
Putting a lot.
Yeah. So Nick, just solve our conundrum for us, will you please? Just put it all in order here.
I'm gonna kind of like let that question marinate for a little bit, Richard, but I'll kind of respond in a roundabout way. And for me, like doing anthropological research in the Amazon region, it's useful because it kind of disrupts certain kind of settled assumptions you have about the world, and I think working in Amazonia, it opened questions about understanding of plants that were just things that I'd never asked questions about or hadn't had experiences with. And so I think some of those questions that Amazonian peoples kind of raised are questions that I kind of bring back in the classroom in the Midwest and see how that might help students situated here to kind of think differently about botanical life and human life and the relationships between them. And even the question of like what, our assumptions about the human, like in anthropology of Amazonia, there's this kind of concept of Amerindian perspectivism, and the human is really a subject position. And so, the argument that Eduardo Viveros Castro and other anthropologists of Amazonia have made is that, when everything is human, the human is a very different thing. And so in a lot of Amazonian sort of indigenous kind of cosmovisions and worldview, like the human isn't a condition that is exclusive to Homo sapiens. And I think that sort of, when we start having those conversations in the classroom, that kind of starts, it can be a little bit unsettling, I think, for students at times, but also kind of opens up this opportunity to think about, like, what is a more capacious understanding of humanity? How does that change how we relate to others, especially if we see them in these kind of partition terms of like other species, or these kind of like radical forms of alterity, like some of that starts to kind of break down. And so I think taking those very sort of useful kind of conceptual interventions from Amazonia helps students really kind of understand their place in the world in a different way, and it helps them kind of think about the relationship specifically to plants in a different way. And in some cases, we also start to kind of like see some of the commonalities too, like a lot of students, because of the pandemic, have just been spending a lot of time cultivating relationships with plants in their dorms and in their apartments. And we talk about how they come to name them, and how they come to kind of gender them, and how they come to kind of personify them. And we don't suggest that those are the same as the way that Amazonian peoples come to understand relationships with plants, but we start to kind of see certain forms of resonance of like understanding the subjective position of plants in ways that, maybe previously they hadn't. And so that leads to all sorts of kind of interesting conversations. So I don't know if that gets to your question, Richard, but maybe starts kind of moving in that direction.
It definitely does, Nick. Thank you. I don't know if Kadeen or Terry have it, or Alcira has a follow-up. Alcira,
yeah, I just would like to mention something that may or may not be a subject that we would like to go into for this space, or later maybe. But when we mention the Amazon, there's many ways in which the seed takeover could, ripple in many directions. And the first thing that comes to mind to me is, as a historian in the end, is how the Amazon has been, seen from many different perspectives, even within the so-called environmental studies, right? And there's that aspect of plant knowledge that Nick just mentioned, or how to relate to plants as sources of knowledge, right? That has been very overlooked in many disciplines. And I mentioned in the previous meeting the film Embrace of the Serpent, and I hope that we have a chance to see it if we haven't yet. This film tackles that kind of issue. It's not necessarily the central issue, but it's who has the power of using plants native from the Amazonian region to what purpose, and how today, and it's not even new, but it's been going on since about 2 centuries already, the Amazon became this place where, the West is thirsty. It's really up for grabbing of knowledge, right? And how the indigenous peoples there, who have they have a longer tradition, right? A longer relationship with this knowledge. What are the options and the conundrums that the presence of the West in the Amazon triggers in them, right? So knowledge, again, you're right, indigenous knowledge, this is about ayahuasca, for example, right? We know how the West has really jumped into ayahuasca as a source of this magical solution for everything, right? And what the film is telling you, it's many things, right? It's many things. And what I wanted to just highlight here is if you want to watch it and sometime later we can talk about it, it's called The Embrace of the Serpent, or El Abrazo de la Serpiente. The director is Ciro Guerra. It's a Colombian filmmaker. And it's available in Amazon, although I don't like to promote Amazon anymore, but it should be available somewhere else. But we could bring it up because it really evokes discussions of knowledge, what we call indigenous knowledge, and colonizing knowledge and colonization, right? Those issues are really at the center of this. And it's great that you asked the question, Richard, because I think this is a huge avenue of conversation. I was asking Nick if he was familiar with this book that he mentioned, right, when I was sending him the question in the chat. Robin Kimmerer is a person, an indigenous woman scientist, that she broke clearly this division between science and the rest, right? Science and humanities, science and the rest. And she's really working with a whole new approach, or new approaches, right? To knowing and to use nature, and to not to use, but to relate, right, with nature, that are really very to the point that we are conversing today. And I wish we have some opportunity. I just learned that she came to Denison not long ago, and I was not even aware that she was there.
So we need to make this connection really quick since we've got 5 minutes. She's coming to Otterbein.
Oh, is she? When?
On the 28th of March. And
thank you for letting us know.
Kadine's going to be on a panel with her in relationship to the grammar of animacy.
Wonderful. Is that going to be in person?
In person, and
Could you
can come.
Well, yeah. Yes. Could you just remind us the date and the time?
Yeah, we will.
Yeah,
I'm
gonna put this on my calendar right now.
Yes,
Terry.
please.
Okay,
That's
this will be the moment.
Super event. You're not gonna regret.
So she's
amazing.
a natural connecting point for all the stuff we've been talking about, especially since the show is named after a phrase from her book, right?
Yeah. Braiding sweetgrass.
Yeah. I think that Janice had sent an interview with her that we were going to read for this week, and then I think Michelle said let's put that off till it's closer to her visit.
That makes sense.
I'm just going to make a proposal. I really want to watch the Embrace of the Serpent. I want to watch the Embrace of the Serpent over break. You know, surely we can watch a movie on break.
Could I also,
yeah, go ahead. I just think that, I think it sounds like a great connecting point and relating to what Nick brought up a little bit ago.
Yeah.
Anyways, go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry.
No, sorry, we try to keep this to an hour, Nick, and it's like, it's always just such a pain. But I remember how Michelle and I met in relation to the Andean Amazon, and it was actually with an artist from the Colombian Amazon called Abel Rodriguez. And I just want to end by showing you, I'm just going to share my screen, his work, because his work, I don't know, I'm not going to say anything about it, but I'm just going to share it just so you can see it. And I'll put a link in the chat. 1 second, my sharing thing, just because his work for me is why I was even involved in this project, from seeing his work at an international exhibition. And this is Abel Rodriguez's work in the Colombian Amazon. It's as far as I know, it's watercolors. He has video works as well. And I'll put the link to this exhibition. There's a video about his work as well, and he's an elder. And his son, actually, Wilson Rodriguez, is also an artist as well, who also sometimes a spokesperson for Abel. And I remember talking to Michelle about his work and being, oh, that's the one artist that I'd like to talk, like maybe we could get him and this kind of thing. So this elder, and I'll just put the link in the chat. So it was nice to just be reminded through you speaking, Nick, and then Alcira mentioning the Colombian Amazon and about Rodriguez's work. So that it kind of came full circle. And he documents plant types. He labels them. He talks about the different seasons and different, and he's also, so he's actually he's a scientist through his drawings and through his paintings in documenting his area, his region. He's in he's near the Cahuinari River, and he's an Onuya ethnic group. But again, I don't know whereabouts in the Amazon you do your research, Nick, but I just thought, given Alcira mentioned that film.
Thank you.
So many things to talk about, so little time. And I hope, Nick, you're able to come back sometime. We're going to take 2 weeks break. So we're going to come back on our first session back again will be the 25th. So that'll just before Robin Kimmerer's talk. I also want to make a pitch for her first book, Gathering Moss, which I love that book so much. And I have it on audio book with her reading it. And I clean the house with it. When I do clean the house, I clean the house listening to Robin Kimmerer talking about moss as well. Anyway, welcome, Nick, and welcome back, Alcira and Kadeen and Terry. It's been such a pleasure working with you this semester. And Kadeen, have a good, safe travels.
Thank you.
And I'll try and splice these videos together. It's such a shame we lost people. Although we may not have had this conversation, you never know.
Fortunately, I have to run, but it's lovely chatting with all of you. I'll
take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care, everyone. Happy Friday, everyone.
Bye, you too.
Bye.
That was such a tease, that one. There was so much to talk about.